Hello, friends. I'm Professor Filip Kovacevic, and this is the 14th edition of the Russian newspaper's Monitor. I hope you're doing well today. Because of the New Year and Orthodox Christmas holidays, most Russian newspapers won't be published until January 9, 2016. Still, I found some very interesting stories for you this week. Let's start the new year with something new and something fun. A newspaper I haven't covered before. The newspaper is called Parlamentskaya Gazeta, and it is the official weekly newspaper of the Russian parliament. We look at the edition for late December and early January. On the front page, there is an article entitled, "What Will Happen with Russia?" This is a fun article that examines the prophecies and predictions about Russia and the world in general in 2016 made by various psychics, astrologers, and public figures, and evaluates how correct or incorrect they were. Next to the title, there is a photo of the well-known Russian 20th century psychic Wolf Messing, and the subtitle explains that his alleged prophecies for 2016 did not come true. China did not take a part of the Russian territory. Also, incorrect was the prediction of the retired British general Richard Shirreff, who claimed that Russia and NATO would begin a nuclear war. However, there were some predictions by others which were correct. For instance, the prediction that Donald Trump would get elected to be the next president of the United States. The article continues in more depth on pages 16 and 17. It explains that looking at predictions and prophecies for the departing year has been a tradition for the newspaper. And so, in this article as well, various predictions and prophecies are evaluated. The article begins by stating that no public opinion research or polling organization in Russia was able to come even close to predicting the vote percentages for various political parties in the parliamentary elections held in September 2016. In Russia, the best-known polling organizations are the All Russia Center for the Study of Public Opinion, the Public Opinion Fund, and the Levada Center. Neither of them was able to correctly predict the vote count for the election winner, the Putin-sponsored United Russia Party. The Public Opinion Fund claimed that United Russia would win around 45% of the vote, while the Western-financed Levada Center claimed that the percentage would be even lower, at around 39%. In the end, United Russia won 54.2% of the vote. The failure of polling to correctly predict election results appears to be a general worldwide trend. It probably has to do with the fact that more and more people either refuse to answer or intentionally answer incorrectly because they do not trust the pollsters. It is also interesting that the Levada Center, which receives Western funding, predicted the lowest vote percentage for the Putin-sponsored party. This reveals a hidden, covert dimension of the so-called public opinion research. In many cases, the pollsters do not want simply to report on the state of public opinion, but they want to shape it according to the political agenda of those who finance them. And so, no wonder that they frequently fail to be accurate. Another unexpected election result for many in the public opinion research business was the victory of Donald Trump. The article states that among all the political figures in the world, only the Belarus president, Alexander Lukashenko, is on public record claiming that Donald Trump would win. In an interview given to the Russian state news agency RIA Novosti on September 12, 2016, Lukashenko stated that Trump would get elected because, in his words, the American society is not ready to elect a woman for president, not even if she has a lot of experience, like Hillary Clinton. However, not many political analysts would agree with Lukashenko that this was the main reason why Hillary Clinton did not get elected. The article also notes the supposedly decades-old predictions of the well-known American psychic Edgar Cayce and the Bulgarian psychic Baba Vanga that the 44th US president, that is Barack Obama, would be the last one. These predictions, if they were made at all, and I especially doubt that Cayce said anything of this kind, are obviously from the realm of science fiction. The article enumerates several other predictions that did not come true. For instance, the analysts of the Danish Saxo Bank claimed that the oil prices would rise dramatically to $100 per barrel, while the Russian astrologer Tamara Globa claimed that the war in Ukraine would be over. Her husband, Pavel Globa, was more accurate when he stated that in 2016 the European Union would begin actively to break up. However, he also made plenty of mistakes, including the claim that there would be massive protests and demonstrations all across the United States, provoked by deep dissatisfaction with government policies. Well, the way things are, who knows? Perhaps Globa was just 1 year off, and these disruptions will indeed take place in 2017. The article also presents the predictions for 2016 from the alleged testament of the well-known Russian 20th century psychic Wolf Messing. Messing spoke of the rise of China, even to the point of its taking over a part of the Russian territory, of mass catastrophes in Japan and Taiwan, and the collapse of economy in the United States. None of these dramatic things happened. This, of course, opens the question as to whether the prediction was really written by Messing long time ago, or in fact by some journalist trying to get extra readership. The last prediction mentioned by the article is by the retired British general Richard Shirreff, who claimed that a nuclear war might begin between Russia and NATO in 2016 unless NATO built up its forces exponentially on the Russian borders. Shirreff spoke about the potential nuclear attack on the Baltic states. This alarmist, paranoid discourse made an impact on the governments and the populations in the region and made the relations with Russia more antagonistic and tense. And in fact, that was the main purpose of Shirreff's so-called prediction, in my opinion. And indeed, I think that the vast majority of that which passes for prophecies, predictions, apocalyptic statements has a very clear geopolitical agenda. It is very likely produced by the specialists in various intelligence agencies and then passed on to psychics, astrologers, and the rest. Sometimes these individuals directly work for the deep state and implement its agenda under the cover of mysticism and supposedly esoteric knowledge. The aim is none other than to manipulate with popular emotions and fears. There could be some genuine psychics out there, but they are definitely not to be found on the front pages of newspapers. Now let's go to Rossiyskaya Gazeta, the Russian government-owned newspaper. Considering that there is no paper edition this week, let's look at one of the most prominent stories for January 4th, 2016 on its website. Here we find an article entitled "The Ministry of Defense Responded to the CIA Director's Statement on the Russian Tactics in Syria." The article notes that the outgoing CIA Director John Brennan recently accused the Russian military of using the scorched earth tactic in Syria. Now Brennan received a reply from the Russian Ministry of Defense spokesman General Igor Konashenkov. As you will see, Konashenkov did not mince words in his reply. This was the sharpest reaction to Brennan and the CIA from the Russian military I have seen so far. First, Konashenkov stated that the less time it remains until the departure of the current presidential administration, the louder the swan song of the Russophobic losers gets to be. He pointed out that the positive results of the Russian intervention in Syria are well known to the CIA. The most important of them is that Russia, Iran, and Turkey were able to come to an agreement with the various factions of the Syrian opposition and make a significant contribution to the possibility of negotiating a comprehensive peace deal for Syria. Konashenkov also reminded Brennan that the term scorched earth came into prominence in reference to the US using nuclear bombs against the Japanese in 1945, which resulted in the death of about 200,000 civilians. He further underscored the devious nature of the recent US military interventions in Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, which involved the total destruction of the economic resources of these countries through the bombing by the US Air Force. Lastly, Konashenkov pointed out that the US-led international coalition systematically tried to destroy the economic infrastructure of Syria in order to weaken the legitimate government of Bashar al-Assad for years before the Russian military got involved. At the same time, according to Konashenkov, the territory and infrastructure taken over by the Islamic State, including the oil fields and pipelines, was curiously spared, which allowed the terrorists to make millions of dollars in oil sales and recruit mercenaries and killers from all over the world. In my opinion, this reply to Brennan was in part motivated by the recently imposed US sanctions on the chief officers of the GRU, which stands for the Main Intelligence Directorate and is the Russian military intelligence agency. The Russians primarily blame Brennan and his deputies at the CIA for this. They are hoping that the new Trump-nominated director of the CIA, together with other presidential nominees, will make a positive difference and stop the media and intelligence witch hunt against them. However, the political stakes are very high. Many in Washington and Brussels have made careers and a lot of money bashing Russia and its allies in the Middle East. Some influential members of the US Congress, such as Senator John McCain, are financially linked to the anti-Putin oligarchs, which I have written about in my BFP article, A Rothschild Plot Against Putin. The entire NATO is geared toward conflict and not cooperation with Russia. And so it will be very difficult to stop the speeding intelligence military train, which is on a clear war path. It will take almost a superhuman diplomatic effort, and we have yet to see the evidence that the Trump people are up to this challenge. Political rhetoric is one thing, and actual political deeds quite another. Let's stay with Rossiyskaya Gazeta website and let's look at another story dealing with the situation in Syria on January 4th, 2016. The title of this article makes a reference to the Federation Council, which is the upper house of the Russian parliament, equivalent to the US Senate. The title states that the conditions for the Syrian peace talks in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan, have been fulfilled. The article notes that the Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan have agreed to propose to the warring factions in Syria to continue their peace negotiations in Astana. Putin said that these negotiations would build on the ones conducted in Geneva last year. The article quotes the statement of Konstantin Kosachev, who is the chairman of the International Affairs Committee in the Federation Council. Kosachev said that the ceasefire regime in Syria was generally being respected, and that this creates a positive starting point for the beginning of the talks. He also stated that the consensus was that at this early stage, the talks should include only experts and not politicians and public figures. He emphasized that not only the representatives of Russia, Turkey, and Iran, but also of all other countries which are fighting against terrorists in Syria should participate in the talks. In this way, according to Kosachev, these countries would affirm their strong stand against terrorism and encourage the Syrian opposition to do the same. The article also included the statement of Viktor Ozerov, who is the chairman of the Defense and Security Committee in the Federation Council. Ozerov said that he believed that the Kazakh president, Nursultan Nazarbayev, could play a significant mediating role in the negotiations. He also added that it would be important for the United States-led Syrian coalition to participate in the talks in order to give its contribution toward the negotiations' success. In my opinion, the talks in Astana are prepared very carefully by Russia, Turkey, and Iran. The fact that they take place in Astana and that they are organized by the so-called Eurasian powers without the initial participation of the West is extremely significant. It demonstrates that the axis of the world power is slowly but surely shifting toward Eurasia. Of course, this will not happen overnight, and no doubt there will be false starts and missed opportunities. There could also be terrorist attacks and assassinations of the politicians who openly advocate this path. Still, the general trend cannot be denied, and though nothing in history is inevitable, it is difficult to imagine how this could be stopped unless there is a global war. The political elites in the European Union, especially in France and Germany, should plan their future policies accordingly. The economic prosperity of their populations will depend on that. Now, let's go to Izvestia, a moderate pro-government newspaper. Just like Rossiyskaya Gazeta, Izvestia does not have a paper edition this week. So let's look at its website. Here we find an interesting story covering the Russian President Vladimir Putin's international and domestic travel itinerary in 2016. The title of the article is Vladimir Putin spent this year in the working mode. The subtitle explains that this year Putin paid a great deal of attention to international relations and the state of the Russian economy. The article notes that in 2016, Putin visited 15 foreign countries. In Asia, Putin visited all the main geopolitical players, China, Japan, and India. He is scheduled to visit Pakistan this year. In Europe, Putin visited Germany, Finland, Greece, and Slovenia. He also intended to visit France, but was essentially disinvited by the outgoing French president, François Hollande. In my opinion, when more Russia-friendly French president is elected this year, Putin will be on the short list of the invitees for the inauguration. In the Middle East, Putin visited Turkey, and in Latin America, Peru. Of the former Soviet republics, Putin visited Belarus and almost all Central Asian states, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and Azerbaijan. He also took part in 7 international summits, including the G20 summit in China, the BRICS summit in India, and the Asian summit hosted by Russia in Sochi. In terms of the most important international initiatives undertaken by Putin this year, the article stresses the re-establishment of the close political and economic relations with Turkey and the agreement with Japan on the joint approach to the southern Kuril Islands. The article chronicles Putin's activities during every month of the year. Here are the ones I think were the most significant among those mentioned. In March, Putin visited Crimea and inspected the construction of the Crimean Bridge, which will connect the peninsula with the Russian mainland. This visit was an important affirmation that Crimea is now the inseparable part of Russia. This is the geopolitical reality that other great powers, including the United States, will have to accept sooner or later. In April, Putin announced the formation of a new internal military structure, the National Guard of Russia. The purpose of the National Guard is to ensure domestic political stability in Russia. In May, Putin visited Greece and the Russian Orthodox enclave on Mountain Athos. When he was there, a special liturgy was served in his honor, while he sat on the throne that allegedly belonged to the Byzantine Tsars. As I wrote in my BFP article on the Orthodox Church as the instrument of Russian soft power in the Balkans, this meant that Russia's successor status to the Byzantine Empire was publicly confirmed. Geopolitically speaking, in my opinion, this may be the most dramatic event since the collapse of the Soviet Union, and it is likely to have long-term consequences that will affect not only the balance of power in the Balkans and the Middle East, but also in Europe and Eurasia in general. In June, Putin received and accepted the apology of the Turkish President Erdogan on the shooting down of the Russian military plane in 2015. This was the first step in the process of diplomatic reconciliation between the two countries. In August, Erdogan came to St. Petersburg and spent several hours in direct talks with Putin. This further strengthened the climate of openness and trust between the two leaders. During the same month, Putin visited Crimea yet again. In October, Putin did quite a lot of international traveling. He visited Turkey and met with Erdogan. He took part in the BRICS summit in India and met with the leaders of Germany, France, and Ukraine in Berlin. Putin's last international trip this year was to Japan. Many observers have judged this meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe to have been successful in bringing Russia and Japan closer to finally signing the peace treaty and formally ending the World War II hostilities. In my opinion, this article does a good job in presenting a detailed picture of Putin's activities during the last year. The way things are shaping up, it seems that Putin will be even busier and do even more international travel in 2017. He will probably be more present in Europe. And there are some indications that if Trump makes substantial changes in the US foreign policy toward Russia, Putin might even be willing to visit the White House. Lastly, today, we'll stay with Izvestia website and look at the articles for January 4th, 2017. The title of this article is "The Leaders of Moldova and Transnistria Met for the First Time in 8 Years." Transnistria is in Russian language called Pridnestrovye. It is a self-proclaimed independent republic within the former Soviet Republic of Moldova, from which it separated in the early 1990s after a brief war. Transnistria's territorial integrity is now protected by the Russian military peacekeepers based there. The article reports that the newly elected president of Moldova, Igor Dodon, met for the first time with the newly elected president of Transnistria, Vadim Krasnoselsky. The questions discussed during this long-awaited meeting concerned the free movement of people, the mutual recognition of official documents, and the re-establishment of economic and transport links. As is clear, the positive resolution of these questions is very significant for the economic well-being and political stability in both Moldova and Transnistria. The Moldovan President Dodon congratulated Krasnoselsky on his election victory, which took place on December 11, 2016. Krasnoselsky won in the first round of the presidential election with 62.2% of the vote. In my opinion, it is important to note that what brings these two leaders together and what will enable their two communities to resolve their long-standing political difficulties is their joint pro-Russian orientation. While the government of Moldova was dominated by pro-NATO political parties, which based their political message on the anti-Russian and anti-Putin propaganda, the state was on the verge of a violent conflict with its Transnistrian neighbor. Now that the recent elections, in a direct blow to NATO agents of influence, brought into power political forces looking for guidance and oriented toward Russia, many possibilities have immediately opened up for cooperation. This was no doubt only the first in the whole series of meetings between Dodon and Krasnoselsky, which will take place under the Russian auspices in the coming period. Dear friends, this is all for today. Thank you for your time. Be cool and stay cool until the next edition of the Russian Newspapers Monitor.
If you found this video useful, share it. Newsbud presentations are only made possible by our viewers. Subscribe to newsbud.com today to become part of the Newsbud community, where soon you will find exclusive content only available to our subscribers.